Okay, so why don't we go ahead and share the agenda and I'll call the meeting to order.
Share now. And can you see it?
Yes, can you make it a little bit larger? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the City of San Diego Commission on Police Practices Ad Hoc Transition Planning Committee meeting of Friday, January the 7th, 2022. I will do roll call from the participants tab. I'm Doug Case and I am the chair of the committee. We have committee members Patrick Anderson and Diana Dent. We have our staff member Charmaine Mosley, our interim executive director, Elena Conde, who is our executive assistant, and Renee, I may pronounce your name incorrectly, Resendez.
Robin.
What did I say? What did I say, Renee? Robin, I'm sorry. Did I say that last name correctly?
Yes, Resendez.
Okay.
Robin Resendez.
Okay, and then we have from Council District 4, we have the Chief of Staff, Henry Foster, and Tiffany Harrison, who is the committee consultant for public services and public safety and neighborhood services. Okay, did we receive any public comment?
No public comment received.
Okay, and we have no attendees to give comment, and so we will
Elena, can you promote Brandon?
okay, and we just got a message that Brandon Hilpert, the chair of the commission, will be joining the meeting momentarily. The budget process, the city has begun their budgeting process for fiscal year 23, and I think we have on the agenda under new business report of that, so I will just leave it at that for right now. Staffing, you just met at least virtually Robin Resendez, who is our administrative aide. She'll be handling all of our financial work, and as well as serving as the complaints coordinator. And we'll also be talking about a little bit more about that position or those functions later on the agenda. And third is the implementation ordinance and permanent standard operating procedures. I don't know whether Henry has any update of where that is in the process. Have you heard anything, Henry or Tiffany?
No update. Still working on it.
Okay. And nothing on office space or standing rules since the last meeting, and anything new on community outreach? Patrick?
The only thing is we, those of you who are signed up for the San Diegans for Justice group, we received an email about a session that they have moved to the same date that we scheduled at our last meeting, the roundtable that we would hold. And so I've reached out to Andrea. We're going to have a phone conversation about that. I did want to ask, first of all, Charmaine, did you reserve that time on the city's YouTube channel on the calendar?
Which time? I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Well, Alina, can we double check in the minutes from the last December meeting? I think it was February 3rd at 5 p.m.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to open it. If I open it up, is it going to pop up on here or?
Actually, you can scroll down and the minutes will be attached to here. I think that's correct. Keeping in mind that's very tentative because
of course, yeah.
And but I'm not sure I would ask them to change their date until we know something more firm.
Well, it did lead me to, and I'd like to get an answer to this before. So pause there for a moment. Community roundtable on the 3rd. So there are a couple different ways we could do this. One way is that, and I'd like some guidance from the committee on this. One thing we could do, because we had talked about co-hosting this roundtable the way we have in the past. And so I could speak with San Diegans for Justice about co-hosting, and then I would simultaneously want to speak with Mid-City Can and Women Occupy, who have been our co-hosts in the past. So that's one option. Again, assuming we're holding that date, I think we should plan as if we're holding that date with the understanding we may have to delay it. The other option would be to do it earlier in the day, say 3 to 5 p.m. or 4 to 6 p.m. And then San Diegans for Justice could host their event afterwards, which might be more to their liking. I don't want to speak for them or make assumptions, but those are two options that occurred to me.
What is the subject of their roundtable?
Well, it's scheduled to discuss the second draft whenever it is released. They had originally scheduled it for mid-January and moved it based on guidance that the second draft wouldn't be available in time. I know that Kate passes on notes from every meeting to them. So I think it slipped through the cracks that we had picked that date, because I'm sure they wouldn't have picked a date to conflict with us intentionally. But so the two options I thought are co-host with the local groups we've co-hosted with before, including them, or at least offer to do that, or just leave the meeting when it is, and that's that. Which I don't care for that option as the community engagement person. And then the other option would be to do it slightly earlier that afternoon, leaving more time in the evening for other groups to do a post roundtable meeting.
Well, my reaction would be, I think it'd be better just to do a co-hosted meeting, because it's going to be primarily the same community individuals are going to be interested in commenting to either session, and it doesn't seem to be a duplication of effort and time to do two separate ones.
Yeah.
So for February 3rd, the only availability, if we're still talking about February 3rd, is that morning from 9 to 12 or 5 p.m. till 6. If we want to go live.
We can't do 5 to 7?
No. The time slot from 6 to, I believe, 6 to 8:30 has been taken.
Well, and that's if we're live on YouTube, right? So we could just do the Zoom meeting and then post it on YouTube after, assuming
Yes,
we give.
Yes, we can do the Zoom webinar like we're doing right now, and share the link for the meeting to everyone, and then we can record it and then post it online afterwards.
Okay, I think I would prefer that, because morning is really not possible for me, and scheduling only a 1-hour roundtable from my experience doing these is just not enough. So why don't we say we'll do February 3rd, 5 to 7, and we'll just share the webinar with everybody, and then the webinar will be recorded and posted on YouTube after.
Okay.
And I would prefer for it not to be a webinar. In our community roundtables, it has always worked better for us just to do a regular Zoom meeting. And the community gets frustrated when we do those roundtables, not when we do other meetings, but the roundtables, they get frustrated with that webinar functionality. So, but in any case, let's just say we're going to do our own Zoom and then post it afterwards. We won't stream live on YouTube.
So you want to do a regular Zoom meeting instead of a webinar? Okay.
Yeah.
Noted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and so the hours will be at
February 3rd, 5 to 7, and I will offer San Diegans for Justice, Women Occupy, and Mid-City Can the option of co-hosting it with us. is there any other group you think I should reach out to? A group that has been involved? I can think of like National Lawyers Guild, NAACP. These are groups who have been involved with this from the beginning.
Right. We could try Pillars of the Community.
Pillars, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have a meeting coming up to discuss other things with them, but I know they're interested in how the commission moves forward.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just, let's say I'll reach out to those six groups that we just named and say we'd love to co-host. I'll be the facilitator, so it won't be like there are six people trying to do the same thing. But I think that's great. Okay, thank you, Doug.
For posting purposes, is this going to be the outreach committee that's going to be leading this?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, does it matter if it's outreach committee or I guess, yeah, let's do outreach committee. That's what we've done in the past.
Okay.
Okay, but we don't want to post it until we know that it's going to actually happen. So I don't know if there's a way, is there a way to reserve the time without posting it?
Well, we don't need to reserve the time.
Well, that's right, because we're not going to be doing it live. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, okay, that's fine. So Elena, can you put back the agenda?
Then, sorry, just to chime in on that, what we can also do is we can mention it at our open session meeting later this month as
Great.
well. That it's a placeholder date and time, but that way we can try to make sure the information's out there to the public.
And I'll send an email to, my big contact list, telling people that this is a tentative plan. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then the next item is the legal counsel contract. This is for outside counsel. Because of the confidentiality, we really can't say a whole lot about it other than the process is in process. The screening panel consists of Brandon Hilpert, myself, and Kristen Rizzo. Is that her last name, Charmaine? Who is an attorney
Yes.
who is on the Human Relations Commission, with Charmaine serving as a consultant or advisor to the group. And the process is that we screen the well, the first part of the process is the city screens, purchasing and contract screens the applications to make sure they meet the requirements. And then the second process is that the committee rates the proposals and selects the top 3 for interviews. And then after the interviewing process, the decision is made. And so that's what the process is. And all I can really say is that we are in the midst of it right now. I put the next item under unfinished business of determining all of the types of compliance requirements that we will be required to review. So we don't forget that, but we haven't really done anything on that since the last meeting. But once we have a pause, I want to spend some time making sure we have a comprehensive list so we can begin that process. And then in terms of hiring the deputy executive director, policy analyst, and performance auditor, Brandon, Charmaine, and I had a meeting with Human Resources earlier this week to discuss their process for executive searches. And I think, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the city has contracted with one provider. It was CPS, is that the name of the company, to do executive searches citywide. And we are inquiring to find out whether or not we can utilize them for the deputy executive director search. And unless Charmaine heard something since yesterday, we don't have an answer to that yet, but it would be more expeditious for us to go ahead and do that since they already have a contract. If that doesn't work, then we'll proceed with our original plan of getting bids and then selecting from the bids the company to do it. And we already put together, actually for both processes what our specifications are. And they only have a limited amount of money for this firm. Basically, it will be enough funds to do up to 10 searches over a 5-year period. And so the policy analyst and performance auditor probably wouldn't meet their qualifications. And so our plan would probably be to go ahead and do our own bidding for a search firm for those 2 positions. Any questions about that? Okay. Seeing none, we can move on to the next item on the agenda. I sent out to everybody a copy of a memo, which was prepared by the city attorney's office. It was sent to council member. Well, it was sent to the mayor and all council members, but it was prepared at the request of council member Montgomery Stepp to assist in the process of doing a question and answer fact sheet on the implementation of the Commission on Police Practices. We learned about it because the city attorney posted it on Twitter, and I thought it might be useful for us to go through it and see if there were any questions or comments on it. So if you can go ahead and scroll down, Alina, to that document.
Let's see. Is it
I think it's after this one.
after this one? Okay.
There it is. Okay. And then scroll down to page 3, which is where the discussion is. Okay. And there were, it looks like there were 14 questions that were posed. So I thought we'd just go through them one by one, and I can give the question and summarize what the city attorney's response was. The first one was, what must the council include in the ordinance to implement the commission? And this is directly from Measure B, which says that the council must by ordinance establish the number, term, length, qualifications, and method of appointing members of the commission, and also include the process for removal. And the second item that must be included in the ordinance is a definition of the terms misconduct and police officer misconduct. And then there are additional things that may be included in the ordinance itself. They include giving the commission any additional duties. And for example, we requested, and it was included in the first draft, that the commission be given the ability to conduct mediation. And the council can establish additional rules and procedures related to the commission. And that can be done either in the implementation ordinance itself or in standard operating procedures. And so there was nothing new there. If anybody wants to comment or ask questions, just speak up, because it's hard for me to look at my paper and monitor raised hands at the same time. But does the mayor have veto power over the implementation ordinance? And the short answer is yes. It's just like any other ordinance, and the mayor does have the ability to veto it. Is the commission independent of the city? Well, the mean, the response there is that it's independent of the mayor and the police department, but it's part of the city. We get our funding from the city. Appointments are made by the city council. The executive director is appointed by the city council. And the rules and regulations for the commission are determined by the city council. So it's part of the city. And so I'm not entirely sure what the intent of the question was, but it's not a totally independent commission. It is actually a part of the city, and the city council itself appoints the commission and determines its operating procedures. The fourth question was, is the commission subject to the Brown Act? And the answer there is yes. The fifth one is, can the council delegate its authority to appoint members of the commission and the executive director to others? And that one is a little bit more complicated, so maybe I can just read it and then see if there's any thoughts on it. Well, the ability, I mean, the city charter, which was Measure B, is clear that the commission makes the that the city council makes the appointments, and that the city council also appoint and set the salary of the executive director. And then, according to the city attorney, and this memo was prepared by Joan Dawson, who was the deputy city attorney who has been working on matters related to the commission. Says, generally, the power of appointment includes the power of selection and the power of removal, unless expressly provided otherwise. Therefore, the appointment process rests with the council. The ordinance does not make anything specific about the selection. Well, and I guess in answering these questions, maybe I'll look at this question with regard to two different things. One is the appointment of the commissioners, and one is the appointment of the executive director. With regard to the commissioners, the power of removal depends upon what the ordinance says, but in our current bylaws, it would be a recommendation from the commission itself, and then a hearing before the city council. But we will need to wait and see what the and I forget exactly how it was worded in the draft of the ordinance, but I think it was similar to that. But anyway, it requires a hearing of the city council to remove them. The next paragraph, which is significant, says, however, the appointment process includes administrative tasks such as advertising for open positions, performing outreach, receiving and reviewing applications, and initial screening of applicants. The council may lawfully delegate some of these administrative tasks so long as the council maintains its legislative discretion to select commission members and the executive director, and to appoint them as required by the charter. And that paragraph is why we worded our recommendations to the city council the way that we did. And so we did not ask for the ability to make selection of either one, but we asked that the commission be involved in the process of both. And we proposed how the commission would make nominations for the commission, and ask that the commission leadership be involved in the selection process for the executive director. Any questions about that? I'm sure the community will have questions about it. I think, well, any comments, questions?
Yeah, I have a quick comment. I mean, none of this is surprising to me. You know, the council, I mean, what they're essentially saying is that the council is the appointing authority. And that's no surprise. And I don't think we'd want it any other way. I don't think it's a good idea for a commission, a city commission itself, to be able to just appoint and delete people on that commission. The appointment authority should be with elected officials. The question is how they're using the word selection. And I haven't read sections 41.2 or 11.1 closely enough, the non-delegable legislative powers. But I think what the community has been clear about, very clear about, is that they want more this is what it comes down to. They want more transparency in the selection process, period. And the community wants to play a role in that process, because their feeling is that with the CRB, they were really separated from the process and didn't have clear view of how it was happening. And there are specific districts that have felt that they didn't, that the people they wanted to represent them just weren't getting appointed over and over. And I know the Office of D4 has shared some of these frustrations. Without getting into the city politics of that, when it comes to the new commission, if we go back to those roundtables early on after the passage of Measure B, over and over again, and those 10 recommendations, it was clear that the community wants to be involved in some part of the process that really gives them a voice in who's representing them.
Okay.
So just to remind of that, and I do think that the city attorney is taking an especially conservative approach in its translation of the word selection here, but I suspect that that's happening, but I do think that second paragraph really gives us some footing. So advertising for positions, initial screening, and so on. What this doesn't say anything about is the commission's ability to make nominations to the city council. And that's where this committee and the community sort of came down in terms of how we could make this more transparent and community centered. So it may be that we don't ask, we don't go hat in hand asking, may we please nominate people. I do think it would be worth the commission proposing a nomination process that could then be reviewed by our legal counsel and the cities.
Okay. And, again, I think the proposal that we came up with is consistent with the answer that was included in this question. And I think expectations of some community members are different than that, which is one of the reasons I'm sure this question was asked. And so I think it will be helpful to have this question and answer. Excuse me. Question and answer sheet available to the public. And the last section there says that commission members are considered non-compensated city employees in accordance with the charter, and their selection is considered an employment process. Therefore, the council must follow a city employment processes. And then in the paragraph above that, it also notes that if there is any delegation, so if, for example, the city council were to delegate screening of applicants to the commission, the city council has to determine whether or not the Brown Act would apply to the screening body. Okay. And which would impact such things as whether or not the interviews and so forth would be public meetings. Next question is 6. Can the council lawfully limit participation on the commission? And I think one of the, let me see. I think the basis of that question is in the second paragraph, whether or not it can be based on residence. Both in terms of requiring that they be city residents or that they reside in specific city council districts or other geographical districts. And then the issue of whether or not former law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and immediate family members, they can be excluded as has been proposed, and the answer is yes, but the city must make factual findings to support that a rational basis exists for those limitations. Okay. And then item 7, question 7, can the city conduct a review of the criminal conviction?
I'm sorry, on that last point, I suspect this is going to be a point of pushback on the part of POA, maybe SDPD and so on. I suspect there may be an argument made that denying appointment for police officers, present and former, and family members, close family members, that they're going to push back on that. And so we need to be proactive about providing, what is the phrase that was used? The rational basis, factual findings and rational basis, one of which we have NACOL for. I mean, there's a lot of, most other oversight boards have this sort of exception written into their bylaws. And so I do think this committee should prepare those factual findings and logical, or whatever it is, rational basis. We can prepare some evidence in defense of that proactively.
Okay. Anything else on that question? Okay, the next question was question 7. Can the city conduct a review of the criminal conviction history of commission applicants? And the answer is yes. All city employees and commission members would be considered to be volunteer employees of the city, are subject to background checks. And the final paragraph says the council can make a policy determination to require criminal background reviews of prospective commission members. If the council makes that policy determination, it would be appropriate to provide notice to prospective commission members by setting forth the pre-appointment processes in the implementation ordinance. Which is a good point to make sure that applicants know that there will be a background check, which in the past is always made clear that that's part of the process. But I might also note that the recommendation is, and I forget whether or not what the exact wording was in the first draft, is that a criminal conviction in and of itself isn't necessarily disqualifying from service on the commission.
Yeah, Doug, I was going to say, to add to your point, I think what we need to do is we need to work with the city to create a list of what would be disqualifying events, because I don't want people thinking like, hey, I had a DUI 10 years ago. Will that disqualify me? I would argue probably shouldn't, but if it was like a felony for robbery or something, in the last year or two, then maybe that should. But I think we need to work with the city to figure out what those disqualifying events are.
Okay. Any other comments?
And I would ask that the community be involved in that, because this is another one of those things that they felt very strongly about, and they were very pleased when we for our interim bylaws removed that moral clause and the felony exclusion.
Okay. And then question 8 is the implementation of the ordinance subject to a collective bargaining requirements under the Myers-Millis-Brown Act, which is, among other things, requires the MENA confer, and the answer there is yes. I don't know if we need to go further into that. And then question 9 is, are the activities of the commission subject to the requirements of Mmba? And I'm not sure entirely what the intent of that question was, but my guess is that it probably has to do with such things as the investigation procedures we'll be developing and so forth. And if there's more to it than that, Henry is welcome to chime in. But the answer is yes. I don't think there was any surprise there either. Number 10 is the commission subject to other laws related to city employment? And the answer is yes, we're subject to all applicable labor and employment laws. And it notes there that the MMBA applies not just to the POA, but to any other city employees who may interact with the commission who are represented employees. Is there a established definition of misconduct? And the answer there is yes. And well, the answer there is that the police department has a definition, which is what in our what we recommended be included in the ordinance itself, making it clear that it includes both on-duty and off-duty conduct. And then the last paragraph says, additionally, the post will soon be reviewing allegations of peace officers for consideration of suspending them. That was as a result of the was it SB2, and by January of next year, post is required to adopt a regulation defining serious misconduct of peace officers. And the city attorney says that the city's definition of conduct should be consistent with the state law. So whatever they come up with should be consistent with how the city defines misconduct. 12 is the commission. If the commission finds that a peace officer has engaged in misconduct, does the officer have a right to appeal that finding? And the answer is yes, they can appeal to the Civil Service Commission. 13 is can the commission compel the testimony of city employees and the production of police department and city documents to the commission? And the answer is yes, with limitations. City employees will be required to cooperate with the commission under City Administrative Regulation 95.6, which I haven't looked at the wording of that, but that is something we should maybe take a look at. And then if the city relies on its subpoena power, they have to follow the provisions of the city charter and state law with regard to subpoenas. It says administrative bodies like the commission may issue subpoenas for the purpose of investigation without filing formal charges or litigation, but the subpoenas must meet an established standard. And I think what we've already indicated, we want to make sure that in the second draft of the implementation ordinance, that the requirement to compel the production of records is broad enough to include all the functions of the commission, not just specific investigations, but to be able to do systemic reviews of all the operations of the commission, because the charter gives us the ability to review all of the practices and policies and so forth of the commission. And I don't think the police department currently understands that, based on comments that the police department administrators have made to us. And so I think it's really important that we make sure that there be strong language in the second draft that requires the city to provide to the commission all of the records and data that will be needed to perform our auditing function of the department.
Yeah, Doug, just to chime in on that, I can't stress how strongly I think we need this section to be. We've asked for documents related to certain issues, and we've been told by the police department, just trust us, we're doing the right thing. You can't see these documents. And I've told them, as the oversight agency for you guys, you don't have the right to tell us, no, you can't review these. So I think we need to do everything we can to make sure this section is as built up as possible to make sure the commission has all the legal options to do our job of oversight, because I can see this becoming a problem, maybe not necessarily with this chief, but perhaps in future chiefs. So I think we just need to be forward thinking and make sure that we get this buttoned down as much as possible, because I can see this becoming a problem, not just today, but in the future.
I fully agree with Brandon, and we've drafted language about time limit on complying too, that we need to make sure is in there, because even if it's clear that they have to comply, if there's not a time limit, given our statutory limitations, we're going to run into a problem.
Okay, and then question 14 is, can the commission's investigatory proceedings against an officer be public? And I guess the answer is no under POBAR, but it does note that the state laws relating to confidentiality of peace officer personnel records are evolving, and the city should continue to monitor legal developments in this area to determine whether the rules regarding closed investigatory hearings change. And so I see that Kate Yavendetti from Women Occupy, who is our liaison with San Diego for Justice, has joined us. I've been looking at my copy of the memo, and so I haven't looked at the screens. I don't know how long ago Kate joined us, but Kate is an attorney, and I don't know whether she has any comments or questions on anything in the city attorney's memo.
Yes, thank you. I just finished my hearing. I got it and I just skimmed it briefly, but we will obviously have our attorneys go through it. So I don't have any comments at this point.
Okay. And is there anything in here that that we would like for our attorney to look at, you know, keeping in mind that we're running very close to our $25,000 limit before we can start utilizing our new contract? I didn't see anything that was a big surprise to me. I learned a couple of things, but in terms of many things being a surprise, nothing was a surprise to me, or that I had questions that I think require additional legal interpretation of, but I would be open if other committee members think we ought to ask for further guidance.
Doug, I think that selection thing that I highlighted earlier deserves an independent legal analysis, and maybe this is something that Kate's attorneys will dig into. But that question of, you know, I fully expected and agree that it's the appointing authority here is the city council. But it read to me the description of selection as the sort of assumption that this broad field of selection is necessarily and legally a part of appointment, and so that selection can't be delegated. I'm not sure that I'm convinced by that, and I would want to see the legal framework that makes clear that appointment includes selection. That seems like a step that appointment is appointment. It's the ceremony where the appointing body says, you are appointed, here are your powers, they begin now, sign here. But it's sort of like a marriage ceremony. You know, there are people invested with the power to marry people. That doesn't mean that they have the power to select spouses, thankfully for all of us. In any case, that's a ridiculous example, but you see where I'm going here. So I would want another opinion. I think that's overreach, but I'm not a legal analyst. The second thing I would say, I was very happy to see in this answer on the screen to number 14, the formal acknowledgement that state laws related to confidentiality are evolving. And I'd be curious to hear from non-city attorneys a sort of list of where they're happening right now to make sure we're all following them, and, you know, at whatever level of court they're happening. Yeah, so that's the only other thing. But again, that may not be something that we ask our attorney to do. It might be something for the National Lawyers Guild and cognate groups and so on to help us track. But yeah, that selection thing, it read to me like an overreach, and I would want to get another read of that.
Okay, well, I will note that the memo does say the council may lawfully delegate some of the administrative tasks, and they're talking about the
yeah, but they limit that, Doug. They say initial screening. And further on, selection is carved out as a category that is a part of only the council's appointment processes. And that's what felt like a bit of an overreach.
Okay. Could you do me a favor and suggest the wording of the question?
Yeah, can you scroll back up, please, Alina, to that section? I think it was number 2 or 3.
And I think also to chime in, and I think this is partially what Patrick's getting at,
It's
is
number 5.
Once we get to the implementation ordinance, I think if we get if we can work with, District 4 and perhaps have that added to say that we as a commission can nominate commissioners and have that verbiage added to the implementation ordinance, I think that might solve our problem. Now, I think
So
That's
go
what
down
our-
to number 5, please, Alina.
Yeah, Brandon, that's what our memo
Yeah.
makes that request.
right, but I just, that wasn't in what the city attorney wrote. She left out the nomination piece. And I think I think it's Patrick that brought that up. But I think if we get that into the implementation ordinance, I think that alleviates that concern.
Well, so here in the first paragraph of this answer, they say generally, and whenever I see the word generally in a legal analysis, my heckles go up. Generally, the power of appointment includes the power of selection and the power of removal. That's where selection is different from appointment. And that's where I start to get nervous. And then there's a therefore that follows. And then what they say might be possible is, you'll see in this second paragraph, administrative tasks, reviewing applications and initial screening of applicants. Well, an initial screening is a pretty limited evaluation, and nomination is nowhere in here. And then at the end of that paragraph, council maintains its legislative discretion to select. Now, again, I actually support the council elected officials having the power of appointment here. Selection, we've used the language of the selection process over and over and over again in representing the community's wishes. So I think the way to frame this question is, the commission was noticed that the definition of appointment was expanded in this response to include, quote, the power of selection. Can the city attorney please clearly stipulate, legally speaking, the basis for that expansion of appointment to include selection? And in its view, the definition, the full legislative definition of, quote, the power of selection. Something like that. Kate,
Okay.
you're the attorney here.
And I, like I said, I haven't researched it and I see that there's a footnote, but because I frankly just got this yesterday and skimmed through it. But I would be very concerned about the way that this is written, because I agree with Patrick. I think the way that this is written says that administrative tasks like initial screening, okay, so that can be done through the CPP administrative staff, but there is nothing in here that makes it clear that the community is involved in the selection process. And then the other part that concerns me about this is the restatement that commission members are non-compensated city employees and their selection is an employment process, and the council must follow city employment processes, which generally mean that personnel decisions are not public. And so, so does that mean that the community cannot be involved in the interviewing and of applicants and making recommendations? So I think there's a lot of clarification that needs to go on with this.
Okay.
And I don't have a final answer to that. I'm just telling you what, some of the questions that it raises for me.
Okay, Elena, if you can capture those concerns in the minutes, maybe putting word for word the way Patrick phrased it, and we can ask for our legal counsel to see if they have any comments on the city attorney's conclusions here.
The only other thing that I saw in this very briefly, and again, I have not read it or done the research from the footnotes, is it had always been our understanding that the mayor did not have the ability to veto an ordinance that goes through the city council. So I don't think that's a huge problem, the way things are currently constructed, but I would like to look at that because we had always understood that they didn't have veto power. And so that's something else that we're going to look at.
Okay, well, that's pretty clear, I think, in the charter. I mean, there's certain things that they're specified in the charter they don't have veto power over, but everything else they do, the mayor does have veto power over. And so, any other questions, concerns? Any thoughts, Henry or Tiffany, or elaboration that you would like to make?
No thoughts at this time.
Okay. The memo indicated it was being done so that the FAQ sheet could be prepared. Do you know when that FAQ sheet is going to be prepared? Is that going to be prior to the release of the second draft, or concurrent with that, or after it? Do you happen to know?
No, we're a little confused about that section that's included in the memo. That was not the discussion that was had with the city attorney at the time we talked about an FAQ. So we are continuing to have those discussions.
Okay. Anyway, as I indicated, this popped up on Twitter and related to us. I thought we should go through it, and I'm glad we had the opportunity of going through it. Interestingly, the city attorney's office, didn't copy the commission on their memo.
I'll just go on record and say that I find it a little disturbing that the city attorney's not keeping the commission involved in legal updates that involve the commission. I would have appreciated at least a minimum of a CC on this rather than finding out by Twitter. So I'll just put that out as the chair, that I find that a little disturbing, that even though we've worked with Joan, that they didn't include us in this, but
yes,
we got it. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, I mean, it was in response to the city council, but I agree that a CC to the commission would have been appropriate.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree, but at the same time, we sent out numerous memos to certain individuals, and we do courtesy copies to many people.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. I mean, it would not have hurt them to do it. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
I guess I'm not giving them a pass, is what I'm saying. Is there's no excuse to not include us in that.
Okay. And then Elena, if you can go up to the and then let me see if I can find my, hold on a second here. Trying to go between screen. Back up to the agenda. And our last item of discussion today is a preliminary budget request for the fiscal year 23, which is the fiscal year that ends on June the 30th at 2023. And they've already begun the process of preparing next year's budget. And included with the packet today was a timeline of all of the different things that occur in the city's budgeting process. Charmaine was required to submit by today a preliminary budget request for fiscal year 23 changes, and let me find the list here. Hold on a second. Oh, I thought I had the right document open. Just a second. Oops, I didn't. Hold on a second here. Sorry about this. I thought I had I'm not finding the document that I had open just a minute ago. And so I'm going to play it by ear, and we'll ask Charmaine and Brandon and Robin to chime in for items that were changed. Or maybe this is it here. No. So one item that we suggested is that we requested a additional staff position for a financial analyst to assist us in the budgeting process. We think we really need to have one person working full-time exclusively with coordinating the complaints. That's a full-time job in and of itself, and we kind of added on the financial stuff to that position. And as we're getting more into it, we realize that we need a separate person to be a financial analyst, not only to handle all the accounting stuff, but also to assist us with the budgeting stuff and so forth. Hold on just a sec. Hold on just 1 second here. I think Charmaine sent me something. See if that's what it. And so that was one change. The second change was to continue the funding of $180,000 a year for our independent legal services, since we don't know when we will be situated to hire a permanent staff general counsel. So we wanted to make sure that our budget next year includes that under $80,000 that we were allocated for this year. There were a couple of cleanup items. They only had 2 investigators in their version of the budget. They had a supervising investigator and a and 2 additional investigators, and we had initially proposed there be 3 investigators, but they also had another position that seemed to be a duplicate. Anyways, we cleaned up some of the positions that were there, and then we wanted to add to this year's budget. We didn't have it in last year's budget because we weren't planning on doing investigations yet. A line item of $200,000 to be an ongoing line item for contract investigation services on an as needed basis. That is for one of 2 things. Number one is that if there is a workload issue of the number of cases that have to be reviewed, or the complexity of cases and how much time they take. In other words, if we don't have enough staffing resources in the investigators that we have on staff, that we would have the ability to contract out investigations. And secondly, if a particular investigation required some particular expertise, maybe a use of force expertise or whatever it happened to be, we can include that as well. And then we also wanted added in next year's budget at least $100,000 for executive search purposes, to include not only contracting out for executive search services, but also transportation expenses to for the interviewing of top candidates, and if necessary, and this might be something that could apply, for example, to a permanent executive director, a relocation expense. Anyway, so we wanted to have $100,000 added to the budget for executive search related expenditures. And I think that was, but anything else that I'm missing, Brandon or Charmaine or Robin?
I don't think so. I think you got them all.
Okay. And any comments or thoughts on that? Okay. Anyway, so those, as I indicated had to be submitted today, and thanks to Robin, we got all the paperwork done to submit those, so they'll be in the hopper for the budget process. Just as last year, additional changes can be made as we go through the process, but we wanted to make sure that that our budget for next year includes everything for this year and any additional expenditures that weren't included last year, and those were the ones that we came up with. And so hopefully we got everything that we need. As Brandon and I have both said several times, as we go through this process, we learn what we don't know, and so sometimes we learn about things that we wish that we had known about previously. But I think that we're looking pretty good for next year's budget. Okay. Any other items of business?
I have a question, just because I was late and this is repetitive, but did we have an update on the second draft of the implementation ordinance?
No. We did ask that question, and we don't have an update yet. Okay. And any items you want to have included on next week's agenda? We will forward the question that was raised regarding the selection process to our outside counsel. We may or may not have a response by next week. If we do, we can share that response. But any other items that people want to put on the agenda? Okay, well, seeing none, I will take a look at our to-do list and see what items we might begin working on. We do have two outside things. One is the determining the list of reporting requirements of the police departments. We can do our due diligence in auditing those, and we've kind of put off working on the investigative procedures until we have a new outside counsel contract. That's going to be a main function of that individual, but maybe we can begin doing some groundwork on that as well. So I'll take a look at our to-do list, and we'll work on the agenda for next week. And it's 11:36, so we're pretty much on target. And so seeing nothing else, we will adjourn for the day. And Charmaine, I'll take a look at the report. What's it called? The
Standardized annual report.
Okay, which is the report that we have to make to the Office of Boards and Commissions, which is not as comprehensive as our own annual report, which we are behind on doing because we haven't had staff to do it. And so, okay, then seeing nothing else, we are adjourned for the day. So thank you, everybody.